Whoops, didn't realize what time it is. Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's been 2 weeks. Took some time off from streaming. Just been working on other stuff. What I have done, though, is quite a bit. So let's make sure we're actually recording here. Cool. Okay. So I have been working on a lot of the UI stuff and the abilities and targeting, and I've got this kind of set up now, where if you click on an ability, and then it gives you this nice little... I'm just kind of messing around with different effects at the moment. So right now I have this little instant static mesh for arrows and targeting, and I was playing around with that kind of mesh thing that grows depending on the location of the mouse, and it resets all this stuff. You can see that in the bottom it's changing the coordinates or whatnot, and that's pretty much all I have. It's a lot of work to do this stuff, so yeah, this is what I've been working on. So let's cover a little bit of that. I think we'll start with the HUD itself, because that took quite a bit of work. There's like, man, one thing I didn't realize about game dev is how much work it is to just like wire up everything between the game and the UI elements. So a lot of this is just calling from the character to the player controller, for the buttons, for the UMGs, to just passing messages all across these things. It's not a, yeah, it's a significant amount of work. So that is what I've been doing. Oh, and I didn't set up my thing. Make sure so I get notifications. There we go. Beep. Okay. So where was I? Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was playing around a lot with different types of FX, like using Niagara components. I was looking at decals, like using decals for basically pasting them on for targeting. And I've kind of switched to having this mix of the spline component with its own static meshes alongside of Niagara components for FX. So probably going to continue with that, and then depending on the type of ability, it's going to have a different type of targeting system so that you as the user knows what type of targeting action it is, as well as it's going to give a nice, probably some sort of Niagara effects of how many, was it cells or tiles that the attack will work over. So in Atlas Reactor, they did kind of this nice little like, it looked more like a decal almost, of just like a nice little arrow kind of section of where your targets would hit, and then if it moused over or if it collided with that hitbox, it would kind of make their character red. So I'll probably do something similar for this game. But yeah, let's take a look at UI stuff first. So let's look at the elements first. So for as a refresh, the entire HUD itself, not the HUD class, I want the overlay. So this is the overlay, and it's made up of a couple of other subcomponents. So we have the kind of the round component on the top. This is going to get filled in with character pictures, which I haven't done yet. We have the character image, character name, and then all this stats. This is all wired up now, so these aren't default values, as well as this. So this is all wired to the character and loaded from a data table. So I think that's another thing that I did get completed, was the ability system. I think I got it to a place now where I'll be able to extend and work from it. So yeah, looking forward to getting those in, and I'll cover that in a section as well. So this overlay is made up of different canvas panels. For example, these ones I've covered before, so I won't go into those. But the ability bar is new, so let's take a look at the ability bar, which is ability bar. So ability bar is actually made up of buttons, which I have kind of customized a bit. So there's another widget blueprint for ability buttons, which is just made up of this. So it's a button, an icon, and then the cooldown box. So depending on how many rounds you have to wait for your cooldown to go, yeah, it's going to be either green, yellow, or red. And this is, again, similar to how Atlas Reactor did it, which I think made a lot of sense. At first, I was going to have each one of... let me zoom in. Magnifier. Come on. So each one of these, at first I had like, if an ability was going to take 5 rounds to complete, then I was going to have 5 bars, and it just looked really ugly, and it stretched out, and I had to do all this weird math to resize everything, and it was just dumb. So yeah, just having these 3 cooldowns of red, yellow, and green just makes way more sense, which again, this is what Atlas Reactor did, probably because they came to the same conclusion. So yeah, so each one of these is made up of the ability buttons. Again, this all comes from the actual data of the character. So if we look at data for characters, we have the character data table, and then we also have the abilities.
You scared the crap out of me.
Could you guys be quiet? Crazy kids. Yeah, anyways. So this is the kind of what I've come to for the ability system. So we have ability IDs. Before I had it where you had for example, one ability ID would reference it could reference a movement table, it could reference a damage table or a support table, and I just realized you're going to create like a SQL system inside of the structured query language system inside of this, which would just be nasty to work with. So what I ended up doing is kind of moving a lot of that stuff to gameplay tags, where I'm sort of applying a lot of the same techniques that the gameplay ability system that is built into Unreal does, but I just kind of modified it for my own system because their stuff just was way too complicated and way over-engineered for what I need. So, yeah. So let's take a look at each one. I wonder if I can make this a little bit smaller so that it fits easier. Yeah, here we go. This is a little better. So again, this is probably wicked small for people with crappy internet connections. That's a little better. So each ability has an ID, name, description. This stuff will all show up on the UI overlay. Cooldown for rounds. So if it's a strong ability, it's going to have a longer cooldown. Energy required to use it. So usually for ultimates, this is going to be like 100 energy. Energy gained, actually this should be like 5. And then energy used per turn. So if it's something that slowly takes away your energy, then that would be used here. So it'd be like a -5 value or whatever. And then ordering, this ordering depends on what you have for the actual statistics or the types of actions that this ability does. So if you think about a certain type of attack where it could take 20 damage, it could slow you, it could apply some sort of whatever to your character. So by having these stats and ordering, you might want to, for example, do a damage first, apply a dot second, and then reduce movement third or whatever. So this ordering just has that built in, the ability to allow you to do that. And then the target type, this is basically targeting information, and I'm going to use this to my target actor, which I'll show in a second, to demonstrate different types of targeting systems, whether it's going to use like a wide range, like if you're going to select a 5x5 tile area to attack in, it'll give you that nice targeting tile of 5x5 as opposed to a single direct line or a 1x1 box tile. So yeah, that's how you're going to be able to add that stuff. And then the stats, these take 2 elements. They have a tag and a value. So in this case, this is a prep, so it's going to modify the armor by 5, and this will tie into the abilities, the attributes of the character, either the self or your target. Visibility, this is if you're going to like, let's see if we want to insert, oops, no, I don't want to do that. Remove all. Array 1. So if we want to add, so for visibility, this would be like for self, do you want to reveal yourself or stealth yourself? Like, is this attack makes yourself visible if you're in stealth? It would have the reveal flag set. if it's hitting a target, do you want to reveal that target and maybe keep them revealed? So you could say, I want to reveal them, and then I want to do it for 3 rounds. And this is how I'm going to be able to apply these. It's going to be a little bit weird because depending on the tag and the array elements, or sorry, the value, I'm going to have to do some kind of mapping of those 2 values. It's not like, basically it's like dynamically typed. I'm not going to have a static system here because then I'd have to do it for every single one of these tags. So I'm just going to keep it a little bit looser and deal with the mess on the back end. But I think it'll be easier to add that stuff in. And I'll show what that looks like in code. Yeah, so we don't need that. Movement, pretty much the same as the other one I just showed. It's going to have the modifier tag and then whatever value you want to set for it. And then visual properties. So this is also going to have like sound properties. So sound cues will go in here, or any other FX if I create or get or hire someone to do FX. I'm going to put all this stuff inside of the ability system so it'll know to do what it needs to do when it does the attacks. And yeah, that's pretty much what these look like for. And just as a reminder, we have a prep, we have ability 1, 2, 3, and ultimate, and then a dash, 1 or 2 dashes for now. Once I actually get this working, I may tweak it and have people play it and tell me if it's good or too much or too little or whatever, and we can kind of go from there. But for now, that's what I got. Cool. So that is the abilities. I think in terms of UI stuff, the next thing that I had to do was, for the player controller. Oh my God, Unreal. You're crazy. You're so small. I had to add a targeting class, and I'll explain what this battle ability target actor does. It basically handles the targeting for you, which I guess I'll show now. So yeah, we're done with the HUD stuff. On to abilities. We have this ability, our actor, targeting actor. So there's 2 things that are set up here. One is the FX, which I just created just to kind of mess around with. And then the spline components, and then spline material and spline mesh. So depending on I'm probably going to have a bunch of these in here. And then depending on the target type that I showed in that data table earlier, it'll choose which one of these spline materials and meshes, as well as the FX to use. So this can basically be dynamically changed as well from the code. So yeah, that is the targeting actor in Blueprint. Any other Blueprint stuff? I think that's it. All right, let's look at some code. So I had to change a lot. I don't really know the best to cover here. Let's look at the target actor first, I guess. It's pretty straightforward. It has a bunch of kind of public properties or properties that it has set for, as I showed, the target FX, the system, spline components and materials. And then it has 2 or 3 methods. One is for spawning the FX. One is for when the mouse moves, it's going to redraw the lines. And then the third one is clearing, just basically getting rid of all the FX stuff or deleting the actor. So that's pretty much this. So yeah, on construction, it creates the spline. It creates the FX system, the Niagara components. We set up the attachment. Make this bigger again. And then for spawning, it's super simple. You just do set the asset and then activate system, and that's it. Redrawing, obviously the most complex, where you have the from location to the location of 2 vectors. We need to first create the spline points between those. So if you remember when I showed let's press play. When I click the ability, you can see how it generates a new arrow every couple of tiles or whatever. So each one of those is a static mesh that is placed on top of those spline points that are added. So it's calculating how many it needs to add depending on the distance of that to and from vector. So if we look at add spline points, and I will be honest with you, I did not know how to do this because I'm not good at math, so I had to look it up. But what you have to do is you get the distance I knew how to take. What I didn't know was to know how many points you need to set on a line. If you want to make it, let's say, every 50 units, you take the square root of the distance of the x multiplied by the x, and added to the distance of the y time multiplied by the y, and then you square root that, divided by the interval that you want to add stuff to, and then that's how many get your number of points for that distance. So if it's like 150, you're going to have 3 points within that spline, and then the rest is just calculating the steps and creating the midpoints, adding the spline location. Once all the spline points are added, then you can create the instant static mesh component. And I might change this, because for instant static meshes you cannot add dynamic materials. So I can set a material, but I can't dynamically change the material. So if I wanted this like flowing, or if I wanted to set something depending on it, which I might not need to. I might just be able to set a normal material for doing that. But yeah, instant static meshes, you're kind of limited in modifying stuff dynamically for materials. But yeah, the rest of it's pretty much as the same as the path component, except the path component does not use instant static meshes. And as a refresher, the path component is this part here, where it's basically drawing the path, and then you right click and it says, okay, you set that point. So this is using a spline mesh component, which is different, which stretches the static mesh to fit that line. Whereas the instant static mesh is just placing them on the points of the spline. So 2 different use cases. And I was tempted to reuse the path component, but it's so significantly different that I just re-implemented it here. The only tricky part of this was to take the mesh that I created. So I created a mesh in Blender, which was meshes. This little janky arrow thing. So this is my static mesh. It's a 1x1 meter thingy, and created a glow material for it. And then what I had to do is first scale it down quite a bit, scale down the z-axis significantly so it looks kind of flat. And then I had to take the rotation of the spline. And this is the part that I probably spent like an hour just fiddling with getting locations, getting forward vectors, and just trying to figure out how to get the static mesh to point to where the spline was pointing to, so I could actually have it look right, so the arrow wasn't like facing the wrong way. So yeah, the trick was you get the rotation of the spline points. That's weird. I'm not assigning this to anything. Spline component. Wait a minute. This does not do anything. Why am I? Oh, I'm calling this. All right, this is just a typo. Yep, it's the same exact thing. All right, so I'm getting the rotation of the spline at that point, scaling it down, and then I had to rotate or add 135 degrees to the yaw. Then you have to take that rotation value, which is a F rotator, turn it into a quaternion, I think that's how you pronounce it, or a quat, and then normalize it. And if you don't call normalize, UE just crashes. So yeah, it's good to know. But what I was doing before, I was trying to add degrees to the quat, which is not right because it's like a 0 to 1 value, whereas the F rotators are like a 360 degree value. So yeah, something to keep in mind if you're ever working with those two. But yeah, once I got the rotation, I could figure out how to rotate that instant static mesh to look right. You just add it as an instance to your components, and then you are good to go. The only other catch is you need to destroy the components every time, because it'll build up. So yeah, be careful of that. So yeah, that's how the FX works for activating the system, clearing, adding spline points, drawing all that stuff, and yeah, that's the ability to target actor. The other stuff I had to do... Oh yeah, I did a lot of just like data munging of like the ability system is now part of the game mode, where on construction it loads that data table, gets everything ready as a f struct or a struct, and then once it's called from a character, let's say you choose a character and they have ability 0 through 5 or whatever, it'll call this with the ability ID, and then it'll basically generate a new battle ability for that character, which just has various kind of helper methods of like this, the type, is it a prep, is it a dash, is it ultimate, what kind of targeting type is it, what's the maximum distance allowed. And this is kind of the worker behind that data table where I showed there's T arrays of values or whatever. This is the one that's doing that kind of mapping, saying, okay, get the target data of the first element in the value of 0, or like cooldowns, or getting icons, stuff like that. So yeah, this is all going to house all that logic for dealing with abilities. So that is generated by the ability system. Ability actor is not a thing yet, right? Because this is, so it's going to have two components. It's going to have the targeting, which is where more of the interaction is done. Then once the round completes, the server, we send all the data to the server. Server sends all the calculations back to us saying player X attacked character 1 and it did X damage, and play this animation. So the ability actor is going to be doing that kind of heavy lifting, whereas the targeting one is what the user does, and then the battle ability actor is going to kind of show the results of it. So I kind of split it up that way. Battle attributes, I can't remember if I showed this last time because that was like 2 weeks ago. This is what I ripped from the gameplay ability system, where it's going to have tracking of the character's stats, basically. So any of their health, energy, armor, shield, and any other stats that are worth tracking. So it just has kind of helpers for base values and current values, and you can kind of add to them and then subtract to them and whatnot. All right, moving on to components. Ability component. This is doing stuff? Yeah, it sort of is. So, yes, I think this is actually called by the UI. So, no, it's called by the game mode. If we search for, like, grant ability, which means it's just going to be given into it. I think this comes from the game mode. Yes. So the game mode, when it selects a character, or when the user selects a character, all it has is ability IDs like 0, 1, 2, 3, the spawned character and character ID, and then it's going to use that ability system's component. So the ability system will generate the ability, and then the ability component will be granted that ability. Again, this is kind of similar to how the gameplay ability system works in UE4. I assume. I didn't get too far into it, but from what I saw, it looks like this is what they did. So yeah, once they have all their abilities, the character is done, and we can kind of call it from other components. So what was that other one? Get ability. Is that called from the UI? It should be. Battle ability. Yes, ability user widget. So this is where it's setting the buttons, and it's getting the slot type, and then it's just setting the ability. And then that is part of the button, I think. Yeah, set ability. Just says it's set. It gives it the ability, slot type, and that way we can look up the icon information, as well as the round and cooldown information. So this is kind of how it all kind of ties together, is through the ability systems, components, and whatnot. So yeah, ability attributes, movement component, that's already done. The pawn, I had to modify slightly just to get an on-mouse move kind of event flowing between the pawn, which is what you possess, and the player controller and the character. So there's the pawn, the player controller, and then the pawn is possessed by the player controller. I forget which way it goes. But yeah, long story short, I'm taking from the pawn which has the inputs, like the X and Y axis inputs. I don't know why it takes so long to do that. Just saying, okay, if any movement of the mouse was recognized or seen, call on mouse move, which calls into the player controller, which says, hey, player controller, move just occurred. So what that's going to say is, are we targeting something, and do we have a valid targeting actor? If we do, we're going to see where the mouse is, and we're going to get the hit results for wherever that mouse cursor is. We're going to check if the component has a tag of floor, and if it does, then we're going to, if it doesn't, we're just going to clear it out and say, hey, this actor's, just delete any of the icons and stuff. Otherwise, we're going to take the character's location of the selected character. So again, when you have, when you start right now, the Rombo character is selected, or the icosahedron, or the Volcube, or Thra, or whatever. So this is the selected character. Yeah, and then the floor location. So in this case of clicking here, it's this character's location from this character to this location. Yeah. And then we're just going to take that targeting actor. So it actually, you can see in the top corner here, when I press play and I choose the ability, you're going to see a BP about, well, you won't be able to see it because it's ridiculously tiny, but you should be able to see it change in this side to generate this BP ability target actor here, which is placed into the world, and then as I move my mouse, this actor is moved to that location of wherever my mouse is. So it's going to update the ability and whatnot. So yeah, and that's what it does. Call set actor location with that location, and then redraws those instant static meshes. So player controller, what else do they do? Pretty much it. It's just me making sure that targeting is set. I forget where else this is called. There's still some kind of jankiness. Like I think you can still, like, if your ability set, you can still like right click, which that should not happen like at all. So yeah, there's some little bugs that I'm gonna have to fix with this. But this is a test map. I'm just doing this to get the ability system working, get damage being taken, get characters to die, maybe get FX working. Then I can start working on the server code again, where I have pretty much everything up until I have the movement done, the rounds done. I just need to get the calculating the attacks and the ability system built into the server. And luckily this is now pretty simple compared to the gameplay ability system from Unreal. So it shouldn't be too hard to re-implement these like attributes or the ability system or these abilities at all. So it should be pretty straightforward to implement the logic here. So what else? Everything else is just a lot of UI work, trying to line things and get all this code of getting ability button clicked to making sure we have selected characters, so on and so forth. So I think that pretty much covers where I'm at. I think what's next is once you select an ability, I need it to, like, when I like right click or left click or whatever, I need it to show that that ability is set. So that is also going to send that information to the server. So the server can say, the user just set this attack ability for this location. It can do kind of prepare its calculations before the round is over, but also allow the user to cancel the ability so they can re-click it and then change it or whatever. So yeah, I'm gonna have to do that next. Play a little bit more with FX around like getting characters to kind of glow red or be emissive in a red color if they're being targeted for an attack. Think about some more of these attacks because right now they're just very default, kind of basic, and then getting damage to be taken and all that other good stuff. But that's pretty much my next steps. I am traveling in next week for 2 weeks, so I won't be able to stream anymore, but I'm probably going to bring my laptop and work on this in my free time while I'm traveling. So yeah, that is pretty much where we're at, where I'm going. Feeling pretty good about the progress. I'd like to be a little bit further along, but I've had some computer issues and other issues, so it is what it is. But yeah. Alright, thank you for watching. Until next time. That's not how I end it in stream.